Well, hi guys, it's that time. It's our Bible teaching snippet of the day. Well, today I'm going to hop in and do part 10 of our mini-series called Original Sin. Are all humans born sinners? This series started when I was reading one day in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 4. And I noticed how Paul wrapped up that marriage was actually instituted by God and that it should not be rejected. Okay, it should not be called bad, that it should be received with thankfulness, and it's good and beautiful and ideal. Okay, and so I already knew that St. Augustine thought that marriage was not really a good thing, and that intimacy in the marriage was absolute evil, that it was lustful and a sin. And anything conceived in sin would automatically be the seed of sin, which gave him the theology of all babies being born as sinners, and if they die, they go to hell. Okay. The church then came up with water baptism because people didn't want to get pregnant and have babies anymore, okay? Because they didn't want anything to happen to where it was their fault that another human would burn in hell forever. So the water baptism came into play. But there's still problems with that belief, okay? So I hope this series that I've done, has helped you just start thinking about what you believe. Because sometimes we don't really think about what we're thinking about, and we don't really dig in and look at the history of the church, what the Old Testament teaches us, what Jesus teaches us, what the early church taught us, okay? Now, to wrap this series up, I've mentioned a couple of times about some horrendously bad quotes that people have made, leaders of the church, about hell and babies going to hell, okay? Today I'm going to read just a few of them, okay? Not many, 3 or 4 maybe, okay? Because I think it'll help us understand a little bit clearer what I'm talking about, okay? And then we'll wrap this up. But so let me do this. I'm going to read to you. We already know. I've got a quote by Augustine, but we already know what he believed, okay? All the way up till the 5th century, from the Old Testament, the days of Jesus, what Jesus taught, what the Eastern Orthodox Church has believed, taught, and held fast to, is exactly the same, okay, for over 1900 years now. It was in the 5th century that the Church of Rome, which we know as the Western Church or the Roman Catholic Church, they shifted what they believed to what Augustine brought into the Catholic Church through other pagan belief systems that he already had in him, okay? And then I showed you just yesterday some of the changes that was made from the 5th century all the way up to 2007 in the Roman Catholic Church. So let me get started, and I'm going to read you some quotes, and I'm going to start with John Calvin. Now, John Calvin is the one that basically formed Calvinism. You got the 5 tulip points of Calvinism. I can do a teaching on that. I've talked about it in some of my past videos. But basically, John Calvin agrees with Augustine that every human being from the womb is reprobate, evil, sinful, and headed to hell, okay? Let me read his quote. And now, he lived from 1509 to 1564, okay? All humans are depraved and reprobate, okay? There are babies a span long in hell. Here's another one. And let me just read this to you. John Calvin had some of his theological enemies burned to death in green, slow-burning wood. Here's what he says in another quote. Forever harassed with a dreadful tempest, they shall feel themselves torn asunder by an angry God, and transfixed and penetrated by mortal stings, terrified by the thunderbolts of God, and broken by the weight of his hand, so that to sink into any gulf would be more tolerable than to stand for one moment in these terrors. Okay. I want to read you a quote by Jeremy Taylor of the Church of England. He lived from 1613 through 1667. The bodies of the damned shall be crowded together in hell like grapes in a wine press, which press one another until they burst. Every distinct sense shall be assailed with its own appropriate and most exquisite sufferings. Okay, now I want to read to you a quote by Jonathan Edwards. Jonathan Edwards lived from 1703 to 1758. 1703 to 1758. Jonathan Edwards believed that all babies were sinners, born into the world as sinners, and everybody's going to hell, all of that. He's best known for his sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. Okay, people would actually be put in so much fear of going to hell when he would preach that they would pass out at his meetings. Let me read this to you. Reprobate infants are vipers of vengeance, which Jehovah will hold over hell in the tongs of his wrath. They will turn and spit venom in God's face. Wow. And here's my last one I'm going to read to you. This is Rev J Furnace, and he lived 1809 from 18 to 1865. And he kind of believes in the different levels of hell, Dante's Inferno, okay? You know that's all pagan, right? Okay, so here you go. The fifth dungeon is the red-hot oven. The little child is in the red-hot oven. How it screams to come out. See how it turns and twists itself about in the fire. It beats its head against the roof of the oven. It stamps its little feet on the floor. And that's an excerpt from The Sight of Hell by Rev J Furnace. Okay, I've read those to you. Now, what I want to do, when I started this series, I talked to you about the one scripture that people love to take out of context, which is Psalms 51:5. And it's where David says, "Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in my sin my mother conceived me." Okay. And I want to read to you, and I'm going to go back to one of Jeremy's articles. He's got two. I posted the one about his mother and the Jewish history, about where his father and his brothers believed that he was born through an adulterous relationship that David's mother had, which she's totally innocent of, by the way. Okay, but the whole community was so hard on David because of this rumor about him. Okay, I'm going to run down the list of what Jeremy talks about in Psalms 51:5 and what the different meanings and what it could, our understanding could be of it. So what born in sin equals, what it means. It could mean learn to sin. So here we go. First, David could be saying that since he was born as a human, he learned to sin in the same way that infants and toddlers learn to talk. It's not uncommon for biblical authors to speak of being born into something just this way. For example, Acts 2:8 refers to people who were born into a language. But clearly they were not born already knowing this language, but had to learn it just like everyone else. If this is how to understand Psalms 51:5, David is saying that since he was born in sin, he learned to sin just like everyone else. Here's his second one. It says, born in a sinful world. Second, it could be argued that what David meant was that he was born into a world of sin. The phrases in iniquity and in sin would thus be understood as a metanomy for a world full of sin. Metanomy, where a word or phrase is used in place of a different word or phrase with which it is associated, is frequently used in Scripture and even in modern everyday speech. An example, the White House is often used to refer to the President of the United States, his staff, and the decisions and policies that come from them. So in the case of Psalm 51:5, David could be referring to the world of sin in which he was conceived and subsequently born. Here's the next one that he says that you could take it, if you want to take it, as a poetic exaggeration. Third, we could simply say that Psalms 51:5 is poetic hyperbole. David is, after all, confessing his sin, committing adultery with Bathsheba. And so in the midst of this confession, he may seek to exaggerate his own sinfulness by saying that he has always been sinning, even from conception. The Psalms are full of such exaggerations that are the rest of Scriptures. In one place, the psalmist writes that he drowns in his bed with a single tear. Psalm 6:6. The Hebrew word for tears is singular. And even Paul writes that he is the chief of sinners in 1 Timothy 1:15. Even today, people often use hyperbole in exactly the same way. It is not uncommon to hear a child who misses several problems on a math test to cry out in despair. I have never got any problems right. In reality, they got most of the problems right most of the time. In fact, they got most of the problems right on that very test. So this is a possible explanation for David's statement as well. And the next one that he covers, his final possibility, is the one that we talked about at the very beginning of this series. David's mother was accused of adultery, okay? So David is saying that his mother was committing a sin, the sin of adultery, when he was conceived. Okay, I'm not going to read that because it's pretty long. He covers a lot of what the article that I posted about David's mother and the Jewish history about that. Okay, and if you want either one of these articles, I'll be happy to supply them to you. They are just packed with good information. Now, I want to say this one more time. J.D. Myers is not just some person that pops up out of nowhere. He is a theologian. He is a scholar, and he has studied scripture, culture, ancient society, and all of these things. He's not just some dummy out there making stuff up. So let me wrap this up with his last little bit that he says. So what does Psalm 51:5 mean? No matter which of the views above we adopt, the view that is most unlikely is the Calvinistic idea that David was making some sort of theological statement in Psalms 51:5 about the universal total depravity of all humans. I happen to agree with him there. David wasn't trying to write doctrines of the church 3,000 or 4,000 years later after he lived. No. Okay. This sort of theologizing, ideas about God and about what we believe about God, was not David's intention, and it does not fit the context of the chapter. There are numerous other explanations for this verse which make much better sense of the verse itself in the context as a whole. And I happen to agree with him. Just looking back at our church history, the Old Testament, the writings in the Old Testament, what they believed about sin, what Jesus talked about little children and about sin, Jesus never said that people were conceived in sin. Jesus didn't say that. And he did not call all children reprobate, deprived demons, okay? So here's where I'm at with this, what I believe is a false man-made doctrine that we have been passed down to believe, okay? Is Jesus is our plumb line. Jesus is our measuring stick. And Jesus is love. And if we cannot see love and Jesus in a certain church doctrine, then it's probably a man-made doctrine and it's not true. Okay, so God bless you. We're going to call this a wrap-up on this little series. I may do some more teachings on some different verses, but I'm going to just call this part 10 our wrap-up. So God bless you, and I will see you right here again. Bye-bye.